This is your host, Dr. Riaz Yusuff. Today, I have Matt Peters as our guest, and Matt is not a new face to our podcast. Matt has already appeared twice in the show, and both of the shows have become one of the most watched shows. So I'm really excited to talk to Matt because the last two shows he had something to share that was very unique, and the ways that he's using AI is definitely very different compared to myself, and a lot of others are using AI. That was so interesting to hear from Matt directly. So I'm excited and looking forward to hear and learn from Matt again in the ways that he's using AI today. Welcome, Matt, to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Matt, you have startup companies, and I believe Threat Informant is the primary one that you have. So why don't you just talk about your AI startup ventures?
Sure. So it's kind of a funny thing because now because development has become such an easy thing. It used to be we would spend I remember we would spend 2-3 months building something, and that was so fast. People thought we were just blazing through it, and now with Claude Code and things like that, you're talking about you're talking about like 3 days. And so now we're looking at so for me, a lot of stuff I do is it's hard to avoid building things that better the development process. It's just because you can see all these little pieces missing. But then I think one of the funny things is that the technology actually advances so fast that like within a couple of months or so, you see those gaps being filled. So one of the things I'm working on right now, just to give an idea, is it's really easy to dive into coding now. I mean, like you don't need to know anything. I'm building. I literally built an app for a shared shopping list the other day, like on the fly. I'm running out to the store and like, and my partner says all these messages like, oh, get creamer, and then more messages, and then more messages, and I was just like, okay, Claude, could you just put this together real quick, and we'll make a shared shopping list, and so headed out the door almost. So and because you can publish the artifacts and things like that now, it's makes it really easy. But so I mean, coding has I typically identify myself as a coder. I don't I haven't touched coding in the longest time. I haven't looked at the code that's produced. I'm producing things in other languages that I'm basing it around languages that suit my purposes, right? But this still the big gap that we have is that Anthropic, and I work mostly with Anthropic. I'm not I don't want to say everything is Anthropic or Claude Code related, but it just happens to be what I work with the most. But most of the gap is still designing your application before you send it over to be built. It's just a huge waste of tokens to not go through and well design out your application. And so that's one of my focus areas right now is building a system for basically project management. So an AI first project management. So you could think of things like Asana are built for us.
Mhm.
And if you look at how you see these tie-ins with Notion and Asana and things like that, but the LMs don't really think in that way. There's a lot more note taking, a lot more updates that are needed. Messaging is a big thing. And so, our concepts of project management all revolve around that it's going to take 2 weeks to do something, and so we need a Gantt chart and things like that. We don't need that anymore. So so that's probably one of my primary focus right now. The A lot of the other things, one other really fun one I'm working on at the moment is um, there's been an advancement recently in Semantic, so the voice chat. It used to be actually just kind of interested. I think are you more of a casual AI user yourself?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
more of a casual user.
Okay. Most people I run is more casual, a bit more
Mhm.
casual than myself. You've used GPT-5 voice, is that correct? Like the advanced voice to talk back and forth?
I think so. Yeah, that's the name. Yep.
Okay. Now I found it to be really awkward. I still find it to be pretty awkward. And I don't know about your experience.
Why?
Like
Well,
so
I use it occasionally. It's more of a convenience.
mhm.
Yeah, tell me more. I want to hear from your perspective. Why do you think it's awkward, or what do you see as a use case?
So well, and probably part of the problem is I have dogs. Okay, so if I'm sitting if I'm sitting with you, okay, let's picture you have an assistant that's sitting with you all day long, and it's your executive assistant, and you're working on something, and you're on a phone call, and this is a really out there scenario, but you're on a phone call. Your assistant knows not to interject during that phone call, or that you're doing something, and or that you've paused that you're describing something, but you pause to think a little bit, right? So
Mm,
your assistant understands that you are pausing. There's visual cues. There's
mm,
obviously you didn't end your
mm,
conversation, right? So for me, my case, I'll be, maybe talking about something and I have to yell at my dog, like, Scout, shut up. And, something like that. And stop biting me, things like that. And what would happen in that, because I use that GPT voice, advanced voice quite a bit. And what would happen is whenever there's a pause, just, enough of a pause because it was purely time, it would say, okay, well, let me respond to this. And you're like, now you broke my train of thought. You broke my, you're,
mm,
you're responding to somebody else walked in and said something. So, so one of the things I'm working with right now is there's a fairly new, it's not that new technology, but it's called Semantic Turn. And basically, it's detecting based on the context and if your voice is trailing off and stuff like that. It's looking at the content of what you're talking about, and it's making the decision whether to respond or not. And that combined with an LLM, and I've had pretty good success with it. That combined with an LLM that's processing it, is really cool. And it'll sound slightly dystopian, but the thing I'm working on with that is it records basically all the time as a buffer, and
mm,
then it's detecting when to process based on the turn of the conversation. Uses an LLM to decide, is this something to respond to. One of the things that happens quite a bit for me is so I'm bilingual. I speak in Spanish as well. Often I'll have a conversation with somebody, and I didn't being bilingual is like everybody thinks like you're just perfectly understand. For me, it's like, okay, well, I'm getting about 60, 70%, and like that's pretty good, right? So like I feel I pat myself on the back for that. And so when so I wish that something would tell me later on, like, hey, you misunderstood that part of the conversation. Let's send a correction. And so basically, it's kind of always on, understands when I'm talking to it, and then understands, basically the context of
That
when
sounds
to.
amazing. Yeah, I totally resonate the problem that you're saying, though. The current voice companion is not as smart. So
Mm,
as a result, I nowadays use Gemini's what I don't know what it's called. It's like a Siri, but it's a Gemini Siri. That's
mm,
better, a lot better than Siri. So you
yes,
can
dialogue code.
correct yourself. It still understands the overall context, and then it gives
Yes.
you the opportunity to press end at the end. So that gives you
Hmm.
the control as well. So yeah, I think what you're working on, I think a lot of people will find a good value out of it.
Yeah, it's more, and it's funny because as I've been developing so much of these things, the minute you're even close to done, it feels like that you get that something comes out that's doing that exact same thing,
Mm,
and so it almost has felt like developing just for fun, like building things just for fun, because there's just no it really feels like Claude's probably the best example. Claude Code, yes, the things I build around using it, yes, those do seem to work better,
mm.
but it's indecipherable to any other person that it's that the advances in Claude Code naturally were any different. They just
I
cost more
see.
tokens than I use. And so and so basically, you could be developing all the cool stuff you want, but you're really, just a couple of months behind, something that's just going to come out of almost by accident from Google or Anthropic
Yeah,
or something like that.
exactly. So I have a specific question around that. That's a great point you're making. That's probably impacting not just you, a lot of other AI startup companies too. So you're working on
Mhm.
something knowing that there is no solution at present, at the moment. But AI is evolving so fast, right? So as a
Yep.
startup AI company, how do you know when to start and when to release your product? How do you time it such that your product still has a value in the market?
I'll be quite honest here. It'll sound very kind of like dystopian or kind of depressing. I don't understand, like I don't see from my view hardly any big SaaS that could possibly be. I don't think we're going to see large SaaS companies in the future. Me personally, I think what you're going to see, because it's become so democratized, best case scenario is smaller niche things. So you might say, for example, yeah, I like Gemini, but this thing that Matt built, I is a little bit better for my needs. Me as this type of professional, I want to use this. I'll give you just an example here. There's a million transcription applications out there. Me personally, what I need is really good transcription that goes through a cleaning process efficiently, and then it preps the data for basically it has like a pipeline to it that's intelligent based on how long the transcription was. So as an example, if I'm just doing something really quick, I want it to be transcribed really quickly. If I'm doing something longer, I want a very detailed, very cleaned up transcription. So as an example, I'm building this. It's like it probably will take just a few days, to put it out as like a SaaS application. And here's the thing: there's a million other companies that are doing transcription. It's just this one fits kind of There's nothing that does the thing that I need it to do, and so maybe I'll have 25 customers, and that might literally be what things look like going forward. And if you think about it, how nice is it that all the investment and stuff like that isn't going to be going into marketing and things like that? Instead, you're just going to build
Mhm.
something kind of cool, something cool. You're going to
Mhm.
be, you're basically going to be aligning. I think this is what the kind of the near future looks like. I think you're going to be aligning to um, a very narrow niche,
Niche.
and I
Okay.
think you're going to have a lot less lock-in and things like
Got
that.
it. But how do people find you? So I get your point about targeting just a really super narrow group of audience. But how would people find you? Do you think there is going to be just one marketplace going forward where people go and it's good, so that's going to be the Google of AI solutions, and then where I could see Matt Peters' solution that exactly matches for what I'm looking for. Something like that is what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think that will, I mean, I think it would be silly now to build for like the web, right? Like, meaning
Mhm.
like build a website, like nobody, so Google just basically killed that pretty much. Like their new update, you don't really search the web anymore. You search, they tell you what what it is. I
Yeah.
will tell you that working with a lot of these, because I don't really search the web normally anymore, and so for me, I think that the different AI companies are actually fairly good about finding those niche things. That's my personal view. Like sometimes I'll ask Anthropic or Claude for a recommendation on something, and it does give me like this really niche thing that's just like some dude built, like I don't know, 10 years ago and things like that. But I think it's actually fairly good about that. So I think that strangely enough, whereas the focus before was really on marketing, like that you do your marketing really well, that you do your SEO really well, I think strangely enough the future is going to be actually building good products, like actually building something that really tightly fits a niche, and which is different from what we've been building. I mean, like, just previously it was build a new version of chat and now you're worth billions of dollars, like if you put enough marketing behind it. So I mean that was Slack's model. And build a new version of chat which we all already knew about. And so whether it's for better or worse, I think that the model though going forward is fairly niche products that, and the flip side of that is, well, the coding engines have gotten so good that you can really just point to pretty much any project and say, hey, make me a copy of that does this. And so you're honestly selling to people that don't have a Claude or Gemini subscription.
Okay, got it. Um, so, what do you think about the marketing use case? When AI came out, a lot of marketers, the people that need marketing, were so excited, thinking AI is going to be the game changer for them. It's going to automate all the marketing for them. Is that happening? Do you think AI has changed the marketing business at all?
Yeah, I think so, and almost for the worse. Again, it's democratizing. I mean, if so, AI is heavily used in like the worst industries. We're the fastest to adapt. So I don't know about you. Um, so if you're a business, you get a million texts now about about a loan, get it, business loans
Hmm.
and things like that. And it's yeah, we had spam before, but this is highly directed marketing. So all the worst companies are doing the best in this, and so you're just getting flooded now.
Hmm.
I would say like Facebook ads is actually doing pretty well. Strangely enough, it's getting very hyper targeted. But so again, I think it's one of those things where you're just getting better targeting. I think the future is going to be very targeted applications, very targeted marketing. And but yeah, I get text now. I get across every medium. Like, hey, you need this business loan, you need this, and these business loan offers are horrible. They're absolutely, they're extremely scammy. And so I think that I think that those are the best adopters right now. The larger companies don't really move as fast. So I think that I don't think they'll get as scammy, but I think the idea is that they'll go to a higher or better targeting with their models.
Okay, that's a really good insight. Um, I believe earlier this year, Anthropic made a statement that along the lines of, "Hey, you don't need a CRM tool anymore. You're going to use AI going forward. We can replace your CRM with AI," something like that, and that made the stock value of Salesforce crash momentarily. So what do you think about that? Is that even possible for an AI tool to replace CRM?
Oh, easily. Yeah. Not even. Yeah. So I'll give you an example here of I have a thing that was building just for me. It's called Canvas Chat. Um, so it has, so basically the idea with it is it generates so you're used to using, of course, like ChatGPT. So you see text when it comes back. There's a standard that all the companies haven't really fully integrated yet, but they're going to. So the thing I'm building, again, 2 months from now, you'll see it in there. So the way that my system works, though, is that I have specific agents for different things. I need CRM capability, right? So the agent that I have for the CRM, I talk to it. It sends back a dashboard. So it creates the HTML. That's the message that comes back. So the CRM dashboard is that. So if you think of anything that you're going to do, and I actually just had to build one recently for our conference. I have a tech conference. It was a nothing thing. It was like, okay, here's an administrative panel, and let's go ahead and throw a CRM on there. it wasn't even, I mean, it was probably 20 minutes of coding that I wasn't even looking at, and works fine as far as I know. There's the integration with it integrates with Gmail and things like that. All these things that you previously paid. I mean, CRM tools are insanely expensive sometimes. So there's a handful that are in the $8 range. Most of the things that are useful are $75 per user per month, and into like $200 or so. If you're a larger company, you're paying $1,500 a month per head for the CRM tool, and if you're primarily sales. And so that is a tool that needs to, be that is one that needs to be very democratized. But it literally is like you can just build something custom for yourself in 2 hours. But there's also, if you're using Cowork, for example, yeah, you don't even need that. The CRM is all about rendering something to you or rendering to your clients. So sending an email or showing you that it sent emails or showing you a version of a spreadsheet. You didn't need this big database to do that. All you needed was basically a spreadsheet and or a handful of spreadsheets. So yeah, no, on 100%, that one's such an easy use case for it, and it does it well too. I managed this was a year ago. I managed all of our emails just from talking to Claude. I didn't manage them well, by the way, but but I would jump in there and it would say, I would say, okay, can you respond to these people? And it would, the only problem, and this is something that I've always said and will continue to say, the only problem is the tooling along with it, connecting to Gmail, connecting to whatever, like, so for instance, working with Claude, yeah, you can connect to Gmail, but it can read emails, can't send them, or some version of that. That's always the case. It's always tooling. The intelligence is there. There's no, it's 100%. The intelligence is already there.
I see. So in that case of using AI as a CRM, what is your database? Is it a bunch of spreadsheets? Is that going to be your database then?
Yeah, basically it doesn't matter for the most part. And so Claude wants you to do what Claude would like you to do is basically use just tokens, but they have artifacts, right? So they're just saving it basically in a JSON file, a CSV or an Excel, and that's about it. And with their context window, you're pretty much fine. Before you run into a problem, we're probably going to have 10 million contexts anyway, so it really doesn't matter that much. Claude's new tooling, which is how they save the data, it is fairly reliable. I would say if you wanted to work with it as a CRM, I would say I would still be right now saying that you should probably have it build a small CRM system that it communicates with, but meaning a small personal CRM system to you is a little bit more reliable. Basically Claude's not architected for that to save that data perfectly, whereas you could just spin up a server, dollar to $5 a month, and you would have at the very minimum a nice backup to it that it would be able to communicate with perfectly.
I see. Interesting.
That's how I
Okay.
would do it right now. 2 months from
Got
now,
it.
who
Okay.
knows?
So not everyone knows how to use Claude effectively to build something like that, right? Did you say there is some marketplace solutions like Cowork, I think is what you mentioned? Is there
So
any
yeah,
ready?
so there's three for Anthropic. I hope it doesn't come off as I'm selling them or I'm a shareholder or anything, but it's just it's what I happen to be in a lot. And to give you an idea, my version of working with it, I'm not really in the interface that much. Like my version is I'm in command line on a server working with their command line product. So, Anthropic has the chat that there's Cowork, which is meant for replacing what you do. If you're like, let's say, an administrative professional, basically meant to support or replace you for that. So that's for working on documents, things that are on your desktop. You can see it can control your computer. I don't think it does it very well, but it can control your computer, click things. Most people agree that it does it fairly well. I don't personally think so. My experience, I think it's got a lot of room for improvement. But it can search the web for you using your screen. And then there's code. These are all built into these are all extremely user accessible at this point. There's no, I do sometimes feel like what the hell, what the hell did I learn coding for? But the even code is available on that interface just like you or anybody else would sign up for. So you can just go into there and you can say, hey, build me a CRM application, and it'll build you a CRM application. Now, what would be better is if you didn't know anything about what you're building, what would be better is to sit and chat for a little bit and say, like, here's what I want to do. I don't really want to run a server. I want to build it on my system here. And it would walk you through that, and it would come up with a spec. And then you'd give that to the coding utility. But
Okay.
I would almost nearly promise you within a few hours, you would be sitting in front of a nice looking CRM.
Amazing. So is Cowork comparable to OpenClaw?
No, it's competitive with it.
No,
And
comparable to. Is that like equivalent, like a product like
similar. Yeah,
OpenClaw? Similar?
it's similar. It's supposed to do about the same thing. OpenClaw is strangely enough like one of the things that as soon as I installed it, I was like, nope, I took that right away. That was a security nightmare just looking at it. And so that one, I waited on that for something else to come out.
Oh,
But
sounds like Cowork is safer, somewhat safer than OpenClaw.
yes,
Oh,
yeah,
really? Okay.
Anthropic's really good about safety. It's annoyingly so. Um, I find it actually really annoying that you try to give it a password or something like that, like a temporary password, and it's like, oh, we've got to delete all of these things because the security issue, and I'm just like, it's a password I just gave you for the moment, not a. So it's a very annoying process working with it. Whereas OpenClaw. I mean, I remember that people's credentials are being shared out left and right and stuff. So
Okay, secure is good. Awesome.
yes,
Um,
better. I don't actively use it that much. I use Claude Code, which is effectively the same thing, just not a visual form of it. It's just not a very GUI form, whereas Cowork is very visual.
got it. Okay.
Basically, it's made for your desktop.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds like AI is coming after CRM fast and furious, probably one of the easy places to replace. Next, I'm wondering about data warehouse, right?
Hmm.
Is AI going to replace data warehouse too? And if you have any opinions on that?
Data warehouse, like
Yeah.
So, what it's not very good at is so large amounts of data, but okay, so what I build for it, this is the building things that support Claude is a lot of what I do, right? And so let's say we're building out something and let's say we're building out an application. We want to save all of those logs and go through the errors, right? So what I do is I attach a logging system, which is kind of, similar sort of thing. So right now we think about the token limits as like 1 million tokens, for example. And so we think about it like, oh, well, you'd have to put all of that into there for it to be able to do anything with it, which is really not the case. So if you take a system like, let's say, Elasticsearch or any search system, SharePoint, whatever, it's really good, much better than me, about searching across those. So my worry for the first couple of years that AI was coming online was that people were just being lazy by using more tokens instead of doing things programmatically. A
Mhm.
lot of that's gone now. It's actually so the Claude Code and the agents are actually pretty good about this now. They're actually really good about searching and so if you, for example, if you said, oh, look through all my files and find this thing, it uses utilities to do that search. It writes a program to do that search. It doesn't actually ingest everything to do the search. So I would say data warehouse, definitely. Any sort of data storage where this is what people thought originally was that, well, it can't ingest all of this data. Yeah, it doesn't have to. It's going to just search, and it's very recently pretty good about even Claude Code, which is, again, I'll reference it just because it's something that you could take and install right now and use. You could point it at a database and it could analyze that database really well right now, because it can write Postgres queries that you can't write. It can write, Dynamo, whatever database system you have. It's really good at. Much better than
Okay.
yourself, usually.
That's good. Awesome. So you mentioned about AI agents, because that's one of the questions I get a lot. What is an agent? So could you explain what an agent is for the benefit of audience?
Sure, I'll tell you. I'll tell you how I use them, and then how most people define them. Oh, the easy definition that most people say is basically it's an LLM that has a purpose around it. Basically, it's using the LLM for a specific purpose. That's a really Most agents that you see are fairly lame. All it is basically a system prompt, and maybe it has one or two tools attached to it. And so most agents are fairly lame on their own. If you look at something like Claude Code, we refer to that as an agent. However, if you look at what it is, it's just like it has its system prompts and it has a lot of tools. And so that's a really good agent, but it's like you can see what the capabilities are. It just has, more information and has a lot of tools. That's the basics of it. So my agents, as an example, and this is if you're building agents, one of the really cool things that I found is that I give my agents the ability. There's not a big difference in the way that I build agents, except for I give them their own machine and I give them the ability to build their own tools. So, mine I communicate on chat, and I give them a memory system by default, and that way they can store the chat in memory. It uses less tokens. They can always go back and search memory. I give them tools if I know what they're going to do already. I don't really worry about the system prompt as much. That's what everybody focuses. Everybody focuses on crafting this amazing prompt. That doesn't really, in my experience, that doesn't really have the effect that most people think. So if you have like a bookkeeping agent, for example, you might say, your bookkeeping agent, here's, you do the best at bookkeeping. This is what a 1099 is. This is what you're going through all these things. This is like the smartest system to ever exist. You didn't need to tell it all that. If you were just like, hey, you do bookkeeping, it was probably just fine with that. It was it was like, okay, I'm
Interesting.
a bookkeeper. All right, good to know. I'll do some bookkeeping. And so you give it the tools, which are, for example, connect to QuickBooks for me, connect to Excel or memory. Mine, what they do is I give them access to a coding agent. And so when it sees that it needs a tool or it needs a data structure, it builds it, and then it puts it into its tool inventory. And so mine are basically I can say something like, oh, actually, we're going to use this system now. And so it builds that connection to it. So that's the only difference I see between like a more advanced agent. Mine are a little bit self-evolving, like they try to better themselves. So on like a particular timer limit, which is usually about twice a day, does a introspection review of, okay, what could make this easier? What is a script I could do to make this easier? Just like any normal, if you had a developer and you said you're a bookkeeper now, they would probably write a handful of scripts. It's the same idea there.
So regarding the retrospection, is that something you do, or do the agents do
They do.
themselves?
Yep, they
The
do it.
agents, oh, really?
Yep.
So how would the agent find out a mistake of its own or opportunities for improvements on its own, unless you provide the specific input on what you are looking for?
Yeah, let's take an example there. So how about bookkeeping? Uh, it might start off and say, okay, I'm going to put these entries into a CSV file. And so I'm just going to add them to the CSV file. But on its introspection, what it's going to look at is, okay, how could I have made this more efficient for token use? There's a handful of things for token usage, for speed, for just efficiency and things like that. And it would come up with, well, I could use SQL Express, which is a small, basically a small local database. And it would say I should store these in there instead. That way I can search them, I can run calculations. And say, if I ran, Matt asked me for a dashboard before. I could just make a Python script that will run and it'll provide that dashboard rather than me interpreting that. And so that's all it is. It creates the data structures it needs. It creates the Python scripts. I mean, the tooling is incredibly simple. It doesn't really cost anything token wise for the most part to have it produce those scripts, because most of them are one shot. A lot of times we think of the applications as these big kind of esoteric things, and really for the most part they're a big collection of scripts, and that's all you're doing is making these specific scripts for those.
I see. Interesting. So, but do you provide instructions on what matters to you, at least to the agent, like the token spend, or efficiency, or the quality of the outcome? Do you at least provide some input so they can do a more meaningful retrospection?
Yeah, well, mostly, okay, so if we said, hey, look, if I would bet, and I haven't tried this, but I would bet if I said, you have the ability to make your own tools, and go ahead and look at the process and see, if you can make this better. I would say it would probably do okay, but I would probably have a lot more unexpected consequences from that than by me specifying this sort of categories. So I have like a bulleted list in there, like I said, token utilization, speed, just, make it easier for yourself to search, things like that. But if I said something like extremely general, I would say it would, I doubt it would build its own tools if I didn't tell it you have the capability to build your own tools. But it would probably end up with a lot of the same things, but it would probably make weirder things. So you just, for LLMs, I think basically because I work with them so much, I probably have gotten to know that they'll do some weird things if you allow it. So we just kind of by setting up like 5 things in there, it kind of gives it the general idea of what to work on.
Okay, and you need to give them the permission to do things like the retrospection, for example. You need to tell the tool that, hey, you need to do a self-evaluation once a day or twice a day, something like that. Only then they'll do it.
Yep.
Otherwise, they won't do it on their own.
Right. Yeah. So normal LLM stuff still applies. I think it's kind of funny that like OpenClaw came out, and a lot of people that didn't work with these tools very much were like, this is amazing. And then a lot of us that did work with these a lot were like, this is a bash script, because it was just basically doing something on a timer. And that was it. So all that's happening is my timer set for twice a day to do that task. There's also other things in there. So it does a wake up every once in a while to check in, like, okay, I didn't receive a message, but do I have, something else to do? And it'll issue its own timers for whenever it's waiting on something to happen. So you'll see most of the agents have this capability now, but so it'll say, okay, I'm gonna send this email, and in 30 minutes I'll check to see if I got a reply, stuff like that. So it submits its own timers for that.
Okay, great. And Matt, you mentioned about prompts, not having to make detailed prompts as your experience. So then what do you include in a prompt? What are some of the things that you make sure that you include in a prompt so that the AI produces what you're looking for?
It's really so much less important now than it used to be. A couple of years I was working on this system for developing and testing prompts, and that has not been an issue at all. And basically, let's say GPT-4, you really had to tell it, and like you had to give it good instructions, things like that. working with the more recent models, so your Opus, Sonnet, Fable, which I really miss Fable, but if you're working with those new models, even so whatever DeepSeek models, OpenAI models, it really is not this specific thing anymore. You're giving it general instructions. They're incredibly smart. So I would equate it to what you would typically tell an employee. Just say,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to need you to do this. And that's way better to do, by the way. Like the only time you really have to really specify on your prompts is if you're communicating between systems. So like if I need a certain JSON output or something like that, that's again, that's a different type of level. The one thing I will say though is for prompts, a lot of times when I'm communicating with AI, so I now will transcribe a lot and I'll just rant and go on and come up with a big blob of text. That is bad, and I know that it's bad, and that's part of why I made a transcription application, was because I have
Mhm.
a thing on there that boils it down to here's what you need. Giving it too much context just bloats everything. And
I see. Okay, that makes sense. So do you have any team members at all? It sounds like you are able
no.
to accomplish. So you're just yourself and using all AI tools to create whatever you need, basically.
Yes. Yeah, I don't I've had a lot of employees in the past, and um it's funny because I hear a lot of I hear a lot of people saying, like, they compare like AI tools to employees, but they're comparing like their AI tools to like a perfect employee. Now I've had a lot of employees that were very imperfect, extremely imperfect, and
Mm.
I mean, and to the level of just not doing anything for a long, for weeks. When quiet quitting became like this kind of popular thing. I mean, I remember looking at some things and going like, oh wow, they were really hiding that they were not working for like a month,
Mm.
and so I think I'm probably a bit more jaded in that respect, and why whenever I look at hiring somebody for something now, I really look at it and go, or I could spend about 4 hours, maybe 2 days working on a script that's going to do what they would do, but and maybe there's gaps, but they're gaps that I've already identified, or I can put in logging in
Mm.
place. Whereas employees, it's far more difficult for them.
I see. So compared to your output when you had like human team members versus now AI team members, how do you compare that? Is it at least equivalent? Are you able to produce as much as you are producing with the real people on the team, or do you see any difference?
I think the difference is, well, okay, so as an example on coding, that's hands, I mean, it's like 100x, I think, something like that. I mean, 100 times more efficient than a team. Um, I remember with our team, it was like, I had a coding team, let's say 8 people were on it. And I remember it got that big because I started off the front end and a back end. And the front end person said, we really need a UI UX designer. Like, okay, so we found a UI UX designer, and backend said, we really need a project manager. Okay, so we found a project manager, and so all of those, it's basically like you just have one qualified person now that's actually
Mm.
that's actually working, and I remember also in our office we had so like a receptionist kind of assistant type person,
Mm.
and somebody handling emails and calls and stuff like that, and it's just like it was a little bit weird that you had um so many people for so little work, right? One example, I had an employee that was working on a proposal for like 2 weeks and then just didn't do it for a company. It was a fairly major job. uh, maybe a few hours now, maybe, and it would be better and actually have been done. So it's just a completely different it's a completely different world. I would say that I have to think about it a bit more. There's a lot of I have to find all the documents and things like that and bring them together. But
Mm.
as long as I think as long as you're on the same medium. So for instance, if you're using Gmail, well, you're able to see the note that came in from the client, that email history, and you're able to build off of it. And yeah, you can't just take it and ship it, but I wasn't going to do that with an employee anyways. So the advantages are just significant over using an employee. I can really see why basically interns and stuff like that, or that entry level is not getting hired, because I worked with a lot of entry level. There was no, I mean, there was, I, you're talking, I mean, an entry level position is almost for the benefit of the person in the entry level position. It's so much work to work with them. Whereas in this case, it's like, at least you have a good idea of what the output's going to be, like that it's going to be a competent output coming out of it based on just kind of world knowledge, world experience.
Okay, that's well said. Thank you for sharing your perspective on that. Um, Matt, I know you are building a house currently, and tell us about how you use AI in the process of building a home.
Sure. So there's one thing I would say is that, like, having AI tools has really given me a lot of confidence to do things that I never had thought that
Mm.
I should not be doing, is how I would probably phrase it. Like, I shouldn't be building a house, right? Um, but what was really nice is we got all these bids from, well, yeah, bids from contractors. We've got, I was working with one contractor originally, and he did like a few jobs at a lower price, and then like sent in the larger bid. And I had it checked through Claude. The first thing it went through, it said like, yeah, that's probably a normal price. Well, it didn't know that I was in Mexico. And so I then said, like, really, it seems high for me. So in Mexico, one of the kind of interesting things is like, for certain jobs, there's basically a database for the area. You can look at, this is what it should cost there. And it said, oh no, this is like double or triple a normal charge. And come to find out, yeah, that was completely true. And so in our area, it turned out that there was just, a lot of people, foreigners moving in, that were paying these prices. So he didn't know, like, for him, he was making amazing money doing it. But I'm able to, just with a little bit of talking to other people, I'm able to find, normal pricing. There's been a lot of problem solutions that I had to solve. There was I just I mean, there were so many. I would send pictures. We built a canopy, a really big canopy, so about 15 meters by 15 meters for parking under. And I would be sending updates in the Claude, and it would say, you really need to have metal braces in between these areas. And then I would just go ask the contractor and say, like, hey, what do you think about putting metal braces? He was like, yeah, I was thinking about doing that. He was like, I did the load calculations, they are correct, but it costs like nothing to put those in, and it would give us a lot more resistance. And one of the contractors just left with nothing, like basically built like a water tank, septic, and I didn't know what to do at that point. And it said, it was giving me instructions to, like, okay, here's what you need to do. You talk to talk to this guy, and I think I would be extremely frustrated if we weren't using that, but we're keeping like a pretty good, I think we're actually keeping costs under control very well. Um, it's searching for contractors and contacts and things like that. I wanted to get a well put in, and I got a quote back, and it said this is literally 4 times over what it costs in the U.S. to get a well put in. It said you could bring in somebody from the U.S. and it would be cheaper
Oh,
to do a
really?
well here. Yeah, and
Interesting.
furthermore, it said like you can just go buy your own well drilling machine for this if you want to. And so that was actually the path I went down.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay.
But it
Okay,
gives you a
good.
lot of confidence because it's like, so I would never have thought of buying like a well drilling machine as an example. And it said like,
Hmm.
well, actually the well drilling isn't the hard part. That part's largely taken care of by the machine. It's the capping of the well and things like that. You have to bring in a contractor for putting in the cement cap. So it's, yeah, it's just really, I don't know, kind of eye-opening. Like I again, like I said, I shouldn't have been building a house. I should have probably called somebody and said like, hey, you do all the like architecture and things like that. But in this case, Claude helps me design the plans, give those over to the builder. Builder says like, yeah, that's or the framer, and the framer says like, yep, perfect. And so we basically don't, there's not really a need for like an architect. And it does tell me a lot, like you should get an architect for this sort of thing, but we can design in such a way that an architect's not needed safely.
Interesting. Okay. Your builders were probably wondering, how is this guy getting all this information? It looks so good.
Yeah, I actually have them. I actually try to make the documentation a little bit worse because if I had really good like blueprints, they would be like, "Oh, this is like a professional job." And I'm more just like, "No, I just need posts in the ground," and things like that.
So how do you organize information such that you have a sanity around okay, this project is separate. I have this other project, this other project. For example, this home construction project. Do you have a separate Claude instance altogether, or do you have separate agent, or do you have separate something where you organize information so it no Claude knows the context first of all, and you
Mhm.
have your own sanity knowing that okay, this is separate and my business is separate and my other thing is separate and so on and so forth.
So that's what there's been a lot of advancements in the client. So again, the tooling. So now it's actually really so the way that memory works for these is it uses vector databases typically, and so essentially it searches for things that are kind of like what you're talking about and in a database that's keeping for you. So Claude has done very well with this, and so you can just jump into like I could jump into a chat and just say, hey, contractor came back with this. What do you think, regarding this project? And you can see it running. It'll say, okay, pulling up recent chats. And so it's looking at its own chat history. And
Hmm.
so it does that really well. It did not before. So that was one of the tools I was building. Again, it got basically replaced. So, you know, or whatever I did was basically worthless. The thing I'm building now solves the project piece because it organizes the project in a way that I can see and that the tools can work with, or so like for instance, Claude can work with, so it can communicate with that as an MCP server, which just means it can use it, and then so it's able to put in tasks and things like that and do some hard tracking. I would say it's kind of one of those things like Claude Code. If it uses my system, it's probably a little bit better and more adjusted to me. Claude, but so on its own, it's probably good enough for everybody else. My system that I'm building is probably just, more geared towards me. And that's why I kind of keep saying like, yeah, you got about, if you got a great idea about how you can make something better, you've got about 2 months where that's until it's able to be replaced, that it's just going to happen naturally. And Sam
Hmm.
Altman, he says that regularly about ChatGPT. A friend of mine was telling me he was in a private group, and with them, and they were, it was like this Y Combinator thing, and they said, "Oh, how many of the startups do you think will be replaced by ChatGPT in 2 years?" And he was like, "Well, pretty much all of them." Just looking around the room, it's just, which is true. I mean, it's just if you're running
Uh-huh.
a SaaS, you're you're building something that's literally going to be replaced in, maybe a year or two.
Wow, interesting. So you mentioned Claude Code. Tell me more about it. What is Claude Code?
So yeah, Claude Code's probably the most popular coding agent out there. It's so I've been using it for a long time. It basically it's kind of funny because it was just basically one dude at Anthropic that was like, oh, I'm just going to make this script that essentially just keeps calling the API and generating your code, right? So it basically, all it really said at the beginning was, all right, I'm going to have this overarching thing that's going to say this, I'm going to design the program, and then it makes calls to put the things in place, and then it runs commands. So that's all. It's basically a script. And so now it started to get really good. And this happened, I was actually a bit offline for a couple of months from it, and I came back to it just a few weeks ago, and it was just like, I mean, it's insane now. I can't see why anybody would hire a developer at this point. It's building its own code, so it's doing regressive improvement now. To give you an idea, like normally you have version 2.7.1, 2.7.9. They're pumping out updates so much to this. They're at like I forget what they are, but 2.7.181 last time I looked. They're pumping out little updates all the time. And so and it's all these cool little features that it makes it an insanely efficient system. But you can just talk to it like you're talking to anybody about build me a program, and it's kind of made for anybody to use at this point. There's no, I can't imagine you'd ever hire a developer for, I, I, maybe not even on the architecture side. I mean, I can't see anything. And also, I've used it for things like network engineering. It can communicate direct because it has access to your whatever environment you're in. So let's say Linux, it can SSH out to systems. It can use a web browser. I mean, if I had, let's say I had like some serious network issue, I would be using that to solve that issue, to fix the equipment, things like that.
Interesting. And you also mentioned about vector database, Matt. What is a vector database?
That's I'm just a layman, but so vector database. Sorry. So basically, probably the concept to get with it is when you submit a prompt, it turns it into mathematical representation, right? So on the back end, this is basically how these work. It's these sets of numbers. I forget how long they are, but these are representations of this is what we call the tokens, right? And so when you submit a prompt, it sends it back to this gigantic file that's a few gigabytes, and it does this comparison to the numbers. Does this mathematical comparison, right? That's how LLMs work. I don't recommend looking into it because it's kind of useless for our purposes. Now, a vector database, what it does is you vectorize. So you basically take pieces of information and you do the same thing to it. So now, when you are searching for, let's say I'm talking about planning a trip to Paris. So it takes the vector, it takes those words, vectorizes it, and now in the database, it's doing a comparison to all that information, but it's matching on it's not matching, it's approximating. And so what you get back, and it sounds mushy, but it works really well. So based on the full context of what you're saying, it's bringing in the appropriate information. So you're saving tokens. It's basically using memory with that. It's difficult to explain because I'm not a mathematician. So I don't So it's one of those things like I don't fully get, but I know that it's working. The process is straightforward though. Basically, you're vectorizing it, and then it's making a comparison to that in the database, and then it brings back that appropriate piece of text, and that's what becomes the context that's used.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Matt. Matt, then the last question I have for you is, do you have a book that you would recommend for my audience?
Sure. So, yeah, there's a book. It's kind of funny because it's almost non-applicable now, but the Lean Startup, and um, yeah, it's kind of funny because it was all about basically saying like, hey, the coding process, that's what costs all the money. So don't build your product first. Make sure you go out and meet with people, establish the demand, make sure that you, talk to all these companies, make sure you have your customers in place before you go and build something. And now it's a little silly because it's like it doesn't cost anything to build the product. And so you can almost build a prototype and then go out and establish demand. But the principles are still the same. Find your customers first, before building
Mm.
something.
Okay, that's definitely a good concept still to follow. Matt, thank you very much. I really enjoyed our conversation again, and it's always a pleasure to learn something new from you. I learned definitely a lot of new things today. So thanks again for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation.
All
Thank you.
right. Thanks.
Okay.